Hey, what's going on, guys? 118 Seth Shadow here. So, for today's content, I'm going to be going through a deck profile of my favorite archetype in the game of Vanguard. In D format, we got introduced to Strides, with Chronojet Dragon being brought in. And after that, I predicted that my favorite archetype that came from the G format would end up coming to D format as well. And I guess correctly, when I went to go pick up cards like I had to pick up the hot stamps of them because they were the only ones that I didn't pick up compared to the others because I already had the SPs of it. But I am talking about Messiah. And as we look through the cards that are available with this deck, they're majestic Cosmo Dragons, although I guess they are technically just called Messiah even as their sub-archetype. But it's a fitting name for dragons that just come out of the heaven and just happen to lock up everyone in their sight until they decide, hey, you have done enough, you have suffered enough, and now we will unlock you from your pains. Of course, that's just a glorified way of saying that Messiahs are a unique type of deck that combine different aspects of a numer mechanic that has never been introduced to D before, as well as utilizing a different sort of restanding mechanism utilizing that. And of course, because of what Messiah is, it is a stride-based deck, which means it does have grade 4s with triple drive in it, and they will be used as part of what is called Stride. And of course, it's not just Messiahs that get inserted into the deck. You will see a number of tech cards that can be inputted as well to support in different formats. So let's take a quick look at the deck list. Between the 50 cards that you see at the top, of course you have your triggers, which are an array of criticals, heals, fronts, and the over trigger for Brandt. The deck is comprised of 4 alter ego Messiahs, and your ride line all comes from the Stride deck set. Neon Messiah is your starter, a Sleep Messiah is your grade 1, then you have a Waking Messiah as your grade 2. The deck also runs cards like Astrolabe Dragon, Claws or Klein, Arrestor Messiah. We also have Flattened Sulfray, a galactic hero. This one is a tech option that I added to the deck for reasons I'll explain a little later. Then you have Cosmo Wreath, which is your perfect guard. You have Destiny Dealer, which is both your Messiah Searcher and Stride fodder. You have Sacrifice Messiah. You have Go Ahead Mikani, which has seen a great value increase due to the fact that it's played in this deck. And then of course you have the 1 copy of Elementaria Sanctitude to serve as your 4th perfect guard. And of course you have the Strides at the very bottom. They are Amnesty Messiah and Exilus Messiah. So to go through some of the deck choices, first let's start with what actually comes from the Stride deck set. All the Messiahs that you see naturally come from this deck set. They are all new cards, and then you also have Destiny Dealer, Astrolabe Dragon, and Claws or Klein, in addition to Cosmo Wreath, which is effectively just your generic perfect card. But the way the deck plays is by getting to Stride and utilizing a concept called Lock. Lock is the ability to take cards that are on rearguard circles, turn them face down, and make them completely useless. You cannot use them for anything, their effects are completely gone, they can't intercept, and you also cannot call over them. This was considered a very annoying and unfair mechanic back when the mechanic first came out during the Limit Break format, or more specifically the Break Ride format. But it has been modified to be used appropriately for D format, and I will explain that once I go into some details of gameplay. But the way the deck overall works is the lock mechanic has been modified for Messiah so that Messiah will actually perform unlocks. The way unlocks work is you take locked cards that are on the board flip them back over face up in the standing position, and then they're free to do whatever they want as they used to. The way the deck ends up playing is to lock your cards, your own cards, then unlock your cards after that, and because they're in the standing position, they will be able to do multiple attacks in one turn. So the idea is that you end up locking your cards during the battle phase, and then unlocking them while they're still in the battle phase to continuously keep attacking your opponent with more and more waves of battle. The general idea of how that goes is cards like Arrestor Messiah and Clauser Klein are probably the two key pieces you need to have in order for your multi-attack combos to really go off. These are the cards that will be able to provide you with locked cards during the battle phase. Arrestor Messiah locks itself, and Clauser Klein gets you a locked card from the top of your deck. You also have Astrolabe Dragon, which has the ability to draw you extra cards if you use it for Stride, and it also gets more power if there's a locked card on the board. Sacrifice Messiah is a booster. If it boosts, it'll lock itself after the battle is over and give the Vanguard additional power while also giving you a countercharge option. Destiny Dealer, as I mentioned, is a Stride fodder, which is another way of saying it can be discarded for an entire Stride cost, and you can also discard it to search Alter Ego Messiah from your deck or drop. Then, talking a bit more about the tech options, there are only two real techs in this deck right now. The first one is Flattened Sulfury. So the thing about Messiah is that until you get to Stride, you really don't have any early game plays. Flattened Sulfury is an early game play tech that you can add to the deck in order to deal with your opponents who try to rush you. So if you draw this early and your opponent attempts to rush you for damage, you can wipe out their front row with Flattened Sulfury and continue to attack their face. Go Ahead Mikani is one of the crucial techs that ends up getting played in almost any Messiah variant for soul charging. It is the only generic soul charge right now for Brandt Gate that does not require orders, because as you noticed, this is a Brandt Gate deck, and most Brandt Gate support cards revolve around set orders. Mikani is primarily a Dark States card, but it's also a dual nation for Brandt Gate, which means it's viable for Messiah for providing its soul for its main draw engine. In addition, Mikani himself can also provide an additional soul by putting himself into the soul for his own skill. So this card provides 2 soul for the price of 1 card. And of course, the strides themselves all work around the concept of unlocking cards in order to do multiple attacks in a turn. And to illustrate that, I will be going over typical plays of what you'll see with each stride from Stride 1 to Stride 2. So when you're playing Messiah, just keep in mind Messiah is a Stride-based deck. So the way it goes is that you're trying to get to grade 3, and then once your opponent is also at grade 3, you can access your G-Zone and Stride units from here to gain greater power and access to triple drive on top of that. All your strides are grade 4, and for Messiah, you only have 2 options. You have Amnesty Messiah, and you have Exilus Messiah. On a stride turn, a more ideal hand would be this setup that you see here, where this guy, Clauser Klein, is replaced by another Arrestor Messiah right here, but just for the purposes of showing how some of these cards work, I'm setting it up this way. So, when you do go to Stride, you discard cards from your hand that are equal to grade 3 or greater when you count their total grade. Astrolabe Dragon is a grade 3, so you can discard it as the whole cost of your stride. You'll stride into Amnesty for your first stride, as if you want to stride into Exilus, you need to discard a Messiah. Astrolabe Dragon also has another effect, where if you use it for stride, you can draw 1 card from your deck. So it replenishes itself and therefore doesn't decrease your hand. Messiah also has Awaking Messiah, which is part of the ride line. When you stride, Awaking Messiah can be called to your rear guard during that stride step. Normally, you will call it to a back row. The reason for that is this. When you stride, Alter Ego Messiah also has a skill. You can counterblast one and lock one card on your board to lock one of your opponent's cards on the board and then give your Vanguard another 5,000 power. Note, the counterblast and the lock on your side are part of the cost, which means if you're missing a card on the board, you can't use this skill. Remember that. This is why Messiah does have some susceptibility against decks that retire, because if your opponent retires your whole board, you can't lock anything with Alter Ego's skill. But moving on, from here, it's a pretty simplistic process. Call rear guards that can attack and move into the front. Something like that. And what you can also do is call cards like Sacrifice Messiah to the back row. And you can do the same thing with Go Ahead Mikani as well. With Mikani, you would also have the ability to soul charge from the top of your deck if you wanted to. And then, of course, Mikani himself puts himself into soul to give you additional soul, which is critical for the next thing that's going to be coming up. I'll also play another sacrifice right here. Then this is the way it'll typically go. We have a locked card on the board, so Klein now has 5,000 more power. As long as there's a locked card anywhere on the board, this is 15k when it attacks. So we'll go ahead and start with the Klein. And then with Klein's skill, or we can actually boost here too. So with Klein's skill, what'll happen is, after it battles, you retire it. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck. And then you can take one of those cards and put it on the board as a locked card. And the remaining cards go to the bottom of your deck in any order. Sacrifice Messiah also has a skill. If it boosts, it locks itself and gives the Vanguard 5k power. It has another skill we'll talk about in a little bit. Then you would attack with Arrestor here. Arrestor gains another 5,000 power if your Vanguard's a Messiah, and you are also at GB1. GB1 means you have any face-up cards in your G-Zone, or you have a card on your Vanguard circle that's from the G-Zone. After Arrestor Messiah attacks, it locks itself after the battle. So now you can see that there are 4 locked cards on this board. Now let's boost with Sacrifice and have Amnesty become the one to attack. Amnesty's skill will go off, letting you counterblast 1, then you take a card from your G-Zone and flip it over, then choose any number of cards on the board that are locked, unlock them, then choose one of your units and it gets 5,000 power for every card that was just unlocked here. We're going to give that to Arrestor Messiah. 4 cards were unlocked, so that's 20,000 power plus, and then Awakening Messiah's skill also goes off. If it's unlocked, it gives 1 unit in the same column another 10,000 power, so we'll give that to Arrestor too. From there, we move into triple drive, so we'll do 3 drive checks. We got a front. All the other cards will go to our hand. And as you can see, the front row is standing again. To top that off, we now have a face-up card in the G-Zone, which activates the effect of the Messiah Crest. The Messiah Crest allows all front row units to gain an additional 5,000 power for every face-up card in the G-Zone. So, the front row now has another 5,000 power. Also, Sacrifice Messiah just finished boosting, so we'll use its skill here. It locks itself after the battle, gives the Vanguard 5,000. That's irrelevant now that the Vanguard is resting, but it has another effect. If you have no face-up counterblast when it locks, you can countercharge. Now let's get back to the board, shall we? We'll boost with Sacrifice and have Klein attack again. We still have a locked card on the board, or the one that you locked for your opponent. So this is 15,000 base, plus the 5,000 from the crest to make it 20. And then Sacrifice is boosting it, so this is 28. And then we got a front trigger, so this is 38. After the battle, Klein's effect activates again. I guess we'll just put another Klein face down. And now, Awakening Messiah is a grade 2, so it cannot boost, but the 10,000 power it gives to Sacrifice or Arrestor is effectively a boost. Also, Sacrifice locks itself after the battle. So, we have 10 for the base, 15 due to its skill, 20 due to the G-Zone crest. Then we got 10 from Awakening, giving it 30. We got the front, making it 40. Then Amnesty gave it another 20k, so this is 60k swinging. 60,000 power. It will lock after the end of the battle. And we're not done yet. Messiah goes on to do more things after your turn is over as well. So, the way lock works is that at the end of the player's turn, all cards on that player's board will unlock. Typically, this would be the same for the opponent as well, but due to the crest, they changed that. Now, all cards on your opponent's side also unlock at the same time yours do. So, during your end phase, every card on the board unlocks. The plus side of this, at least, is that all opponents' cards that were unlocked get bound. And now for the final fun part of this whole thing. We have Alter Ego Messiah's special ability. It's a GB2 skill, meaning that you need to have at least 2 face-up G units among your G-Zone and your Vanguard circle, but for every time a card unlocks, you Soul Blast 1 and draw. If you recall, there were 4 unlocks on this board and 5 and a 5th unlock from the opponent's side. So even though your opponent bound the card, it was still an unlock. And we have 3 more soul, so we could actually just pay out all 3 soul, in addition to the one I did earlier, to draw 4 cards at your end phase, leaving you with a hand that went from 1 to 8. And not only is it 8 cards, you also have a full board for the next turn. Now, unfortunately, we didn't draw any perfect cards, so next turn might be a little bit tough, but we're still in a pretty good position. For the next turn, we also have Destiny Dealer. This way, we'll be able to stride with only 1 card, because Destiny Dealer counts as grade 3 if it's in your hand and discarded for stride fodder. And if you somehow lose your Arrestor Messiah or Klein, you've at least got another Arrestor for the next turn. And that's the general outlook for how the first stride would go for Messiah. So now let's take a look at how a second stride for Messiah would go. As I mentioned before, between Amnesty and Exilus, you'll want to use Exilus second. The reason being is that Exilus has a GB2 skill. Because it's a GB2 skill, it's useless on the first stride, because between your G-Zone and your Vanguard circle, there will only be the unit on the Vanguard circle, which means GB2 would not be active. So let's go ahead and see what the second stride would look like. If we want to go into Exilus, we do have to discard a card with Messiah in its card name, so we have to discard Alter Ego Messiah in order to stride, and it has to be at least a grade 3. So you can't play multiple Awakening Messiahs or discard a Sacrifice or an Arrestor to be able to stride into Exilus. While it does say Messiah specifically, it does at least say grade 3. So if we somehow get more Messiahs in this deck that are grade 3 or higher, they'll be usable with Exilus too. But we'll see. In any case, Now we've gone and strode into Excellus. We'll stride skill first. I'll go ahead and lock the Awakening, lock something on the opponent's board, and now let's go ahead and start taking a look at what else we can do here. We have an Arrestor Messiah, so we'll go ahead and put that here. And I have another Klein in my hand, so let's go ahead and use that setup. Alright, let's go ahead and attack. So for this, we'll start with Arrestor. We have 2 face-up cards in the G zone right now, so the front row has another 10,000 bonus. And then of course Arrestor is 15,000 due to its own skills, so this is swinging for 25,000 right now. It will lock at the end of the battle. Sacrifice will boost, and Klein will attack next. This is also 25 for the same reasons. Boosted by this will give it 33. At the end of that battle, Sacrifice will lock, the Vanguard gets another 5,000. Klein will retire. We look at the top 3 and choose a card to put on the board locked. Now we once again have 4 locked cards. I'll boost with Sacrifice and have Excellus attack. Counterblast 1. This will allow Excellus to use his GB2 skill. Just like with Amnesty Messiah, unlock as many cards as you like that are on the board. In addition to that, for every card that you unlocked, you stand another unit too. Then, the entire front row gets 10,000 power, and Excellus will get another critical. So it will be swinging in for 2 damage. Then all your other skills here, Awakening Messiah goes off, giving Arrestor another 10,000. You also have Astrolabe Dragon here. If any player has a locked card, this card is 10,000 power higher. And because you locked something with your Stride skill earlier, that's currently active too. And of course, Excellus has triple drive. So we'll go ahead and do that. No triggers this time. But we do have a lot of power going this turn. Thanks to Excellus' skill, we now have 10,000 additional to the front row. Another 10,000 that's coming from the Crest effect. And on top of that, Astrolabe is 10,000 greater. Arrestor's 10,000 greater from your Awakening, which means that's already 30,000 to both your rear guards just from these 3 skills alone, and Arrestor is going to get another 5,000 on attack, which means Arrestor will end up swinging in for 45, locking itself at the end of the battle. You boost with Sacrifice, Astrolabe swings. That 3,000 boost makes this card a 43, and boosted by Sacrifice, it's a 51. This card will lock itself at the end of the battle, and of course this Sacrifice also locked at the end of the battle. And that's what a second stride would look like. Of course, once you get to the end phase, the same thing happens. All of your cards will unlock, all of your opponent's cards will unlock and get bound. We don't have any soul this time. Normally, you end up depleting almost all your soul with the first stride, depending on how many locked cards you had from it. You could play Mikani to refresh your soul that way. So I could have, instead of just going straight into playing the front row, played the Mikani to soul charge a card, which would have actually gotten me a trigger, and then put the Mikani into soul, and I would have been able to draw 2 more cards after that. And that's how Messiah typically plays for each of its different strides. Note that this is a pretty ideal scenario. So just keep that in mind and have fun. This deck is powerful once you get to stride, and it's pretty fun. It's my favorite archetype for a reason, but I hope you enjoy it as much as I do as you play your games.